Have you ever noticed that the phrase all-inclusive does something deeply concerning to the human brain? The moment people realize a service is prepaid, they stop acting like relaxed vacationers and start behaving like corporate liquidators trying to bankrupt the ship. Let's examine what happens when the pursuit of getting your money's worth completely erases common sense. 1. On a 3,000-passenger vessel sailing the Mediterranean, the concept of a daily drink limit is primarily designed to prevent medical emergencies. But for a solo traveler named Gary in cabin 6112, the 15-drink daily cap was not a safety measure. It was a strict contractual obligation that he was determined to extract value from. Gary was a 50-something retired actuary from Manchester who had purchased the premium beverage package for roughly $110 a day, and he was mathematically resolved to bankrupt the European cruise company one sip at a time. Behavioral economists often study the sunk cost fallacy, combined with the zero price effect, a psychological trap where the perception of getting items for free after an initial upfront payment causes humans to completely abandon their natural preference for comfort, choosing instead to consume past the point of actual enjoyment just to balance a mental spreadsheet. If you have ever forced yourself to eat a third plate of lukewarm pasta at a buffet simply because you paid the entry fee, you understand the baseline of Gary's psychology, but Gary escalated this human impulse into an industrial logistics empire. By day 2 of the 12-day voyage, bartenders across the ship started noticing his highly specific, joyless routine. He wasn't getting aggressively drunk. He was harvesting. He would approach a busy bar, order a top-shelf whiskey. Neat, take a microscopic sip, grimace because he clearly despised whiskey, leave the glass on the counter, and immediately ask for an unopened can of premium sparkling water and an imported sports drink. The cruise line's policy required crew members to crack the seal on all cans before handing them over, a rule specifically designed to prevent hoarding. Gary countered this protocol by carrying his own personal roll of heavy-duty silver duct tape. The exact millisecond a bartender popped the tab on a can of electrolyte water, Gary would rip off a precise 2-inch square of tape, seal the aluminum opening with surgical speed, and drop the can into a reinforced canvas tote bag. When a bartender politely informed him that the package was meant for immediate, on-the-spot consumption, Gary produced a laminated, highlighted printout of the cruise line's terms and conditions, tapping a specific clause with a travel-sized metal stylus and declaring that the legal definition of consumption did not dictate a mandatory time frame. By day 8, his cabin steward reported to his supervisor that room 6112 was becoming a structural hazard. Gary had constructed a shimmering aluminum pyramid of taped-up beverages on his vanity, which had eventually spilled over onto the small glass coffee table, lined the entire perimeter of his bed, and stacked up inside the shower stall. There were exactly 84 cans of sparkling water, 52 sports drinks, and 22 glass bottles of premium juice, all meticulously sealed with tape. The sheer weight of his hoard had actually snapped one of the straps on his canvas bag. The climax of Gary's operation occurred on the final evening during debarkation prep. Because you cannot fly internationally with liquid carry-ons, and Gary violently refused to leave his hard-won treasures behind in Rome, he marched down to the guest services desk at 11:15 at night. He didn't want a refund. He wanted the ship's logistics officer to provide him with 4 commercial cardboard shipping boxes, packing peanuts, and the necessary Italian customs forms to freight mail 158 taped-up beverages across the continent to his home. When the exhausted desk agent blinked and calmly explained that a luxury cruise ship was not a DHL processing center, Gary looked at her with genuine, heartbroken betrayal, sighed heavily, and asked if she could at least provide a heavy-duty pallet jack so he could wheel his liquid inheritance down the gangway himself. 2. When a major American cruise line markets their vacations as a place where you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want, most reasonable adults interpret this to mean they can order a late-night slice of pizza without feeling guilty. But for a family of 4 from Texas sharing a grand suite on deck 10 of a new megaship, this marketing slogan was interpreted as a legal license to requisition the ship's entire agricultural supply chain for future use. The situation began quietly on the morning of day 3, when room service operations received a breakfast order so aggressively comprehensive it briefly froze the digital display screen in the galley. The family in Suite 1022. O hadn't just ordered breakfast, they had ordered the concept of breakfast. The slip requested 12 omelets, 4 egg white, 4 western, 4 mushroom, 24 sides of hash browns, 3 massive platters of smoked salmon, an entire loaf of toasted brioche, and 36 individual links of chicken sausage. Social scientists note that when people are completely removed from their local community and placed in a temporary prepaid environment, the social friction that usually prevents us from acting like greedy raccoons completely evaporates, replaced by a hyperfixation on maximizing the all-inclusive label. When 2 crew members arrived with 3 rolling carts to deliver this feast, they expected to find a large gathering. Instead, they found the family sitting on the balcony in matching plush robes, looking at their phones. The father instructed the crew to arrange all 32 plates on the dining table, the coffee table, and the vanity, effectively transforming their suite into a private, climate-controlled buffet. The bizarre part was that they barely ate it. A cabin steward later confirmed they nibbled on a single piece of salmon and maybe a half a croissant. This daily ritual of staging a morning banquet continued for 4 days, generating a staggering amount of supposed food waste that the room service staff silently hauled away every afternoon. However, the crew soon realized they weren't hauling away waste. They were hauling away empty plates. The food itself was vanishing, but the family was never seen eating it. The true depth of their operation was revealed on day 6, just before the ship was scheduled to return to port in Miami. The medical center on Deck 3 received a frantic, highly demanding phone call from the mother in the suite, insisting that the ship's doctor immediately dispatch 10 pounds of dry ice to her room. When the nurse asked if there was a medical emergency requiring refrigeration, the mother confidently explained that they needed to transport temperature-sensitive biological assets on their afternoon flight to Chicago. Concerned about a potential medical crisis, the chief nurse personally rushed up to the suite, only to discover what looked like a subterranean meal prep factory. The family had brought over 50 plastic Tupperware containers in their checked luggage, deliberately packing empty suitcases. Over the course of the week, they had systematically hoarded every untouched omelet, every strip of bacon, every slice of salmon, and over 60 jumbo shrimp from the dining room, packing them into neat little stacks in their mini fridge and the ice buckets. The biological assets were actually 3 days' worth of stolen buffet food that they intended to use for their family dinners for the entire following week back in Illinois. The twist, however, didn't happen in the room. After the nurse flatly refused to hand over medical-grade dry ice for stolen shrimp, the family improvised with regular ice in Ziploc bags, resulting in wildly leaking suitcases. When they finally reached the airport, they discovered their luggage was nearly 80 pounds overweight due to the sheer mass of frozen hash browns and soggy salmon. Rather than accept defeat, the father stood at the Delta Airlines check-in counter, pulled out his phone, and called the cruise line's corporate customer service number, furiously demanding that the cruise company reimburse him for the $200 overweight baggage fee. His argument, delivered with zero irony to a stunned phone representative, was that since the excess weight inside his suitcase consisted entirely of all-inclusive food that technically belonged to him under the terms of his cruise fare, the cruise line was financially responsible for the logistical cost of flying their own heavy omelets back to Chicago. 3. On a 7-day Alaskan sailing, a retired couple from Toronto discovered that while the ship's buffet strictly monitored the meat carving station, the sprawling complimentary tea and condiment kiosk was completely unguarded. The cruise line stocked this area with premium silk tea pyramids, imported honey packets, and tiny foil-wrapped squares of European butter, naturally assuming passengers would take 1 or 2 per meal. But for Arthur and Linda, this unattended kiosk wasn't a convenience. It was a wholesale distribution center for their winter pantry. Every morning at precisely 6:15, before the main breakfast rush, they arrived at the Lido deck not with plates, but with a multi-tiered plastic fishing tackle box. While normal passengers were sleepily pouring coffee, Arthur would systematically empty the entire display of Earl Grey and chamomile into the top compartments, while Linda mechanically shoveled exactly 40 packets of raw cane sugar into her oversized leather handbag. The buffet crew was forced to restock the station up to 6 times a morning, entirely bewildered by the sheer velocity of the ship's tea consumption. The operation finally hit a wall on day 5, when the food and beverage manager caught Arthur aggressively attempting to cram 35 foil-wrapped pats of chilled butter into a wide-mouth stainless steel thermos. When the manager gently pointed out that hoarding raw dairy in a thermos was both a severe health hazard and highly unusual, Linda became deeply offended. She defensively snapped her tackle box shut and argued that since their all-inclusive fare covered the cost of unlimited baked goods, the cruise line technically owed them this butter, and they were simply pre-collecting their rightful daily dairy allowance to make shortbread cookies for their grandchildren back in Canada. 4. On a luxury European line, passengers booking the top-tier owner's suite are granted the highly coveted onboard perk of unlimited complimentary laundry and pressing services. This is primarily designed so wealthy guests can have their evening wear meticulously steamed before a captain's gala. But a 30-something tech developer named Marcus from San Francisco saw it as an opportunity to outsource his domestic chores across international waters. When Marcus boarded the ship in Barcelona, his cabin steward noticed he was dragging 3 massive scuffed camping duffels that looked entirely out of place in a penthouse environment. Within 2 hours of embarkation, before the ship had even completed the mandatory safety drill, Marcus summoned the steward and casually handed over 112 individual items of clothing to be washed, heavily starched, and folded. The crew initially assumed he was just a chronically overpacked traveler, until the laundry room manager called the suite to report a deeply confusing operational problem. None of the clothes were vacation wear. The bags contained grass-stained denim, heavily worn winter coats, violently dirty gym socks, and a king-size duvet cover smelling faintly of wet dog. Marcus hadn't packed for a Mediterranean cruise. He had brought 3 months' worth of accumulated laundry from his apartment because his washing machine at home had broken down. He had calculated that the suite's included laundry perk was mathematically cheaper than hiring a premium dry cleaner in the Bay Area, essentially hijacking a billion-dollar maritime vessel and its highly trained hospitality staff to serve as his own personal floating laundromat. 5. The concept of the unlimited digital photo package is simple. For a flat fee of $200, passengers can download every professional portrait taken of them by the ship's roaming photographers. However, for a young honeymooning couple from Sydney, the word unlimited did not mean infinite digital files. They interpreted it as having legally retained a full-time private paparazzi to document their maritime existence. The bizarre behavior began on day 2. While most guests are perfectly happy to pause for a quick photo in front of a painted staircase backdrop on formal night, this couple began actively hunting a 22-year-old junior staff photographer named Julian. When Julian arrived at the Lido deck to take generic, candid shots of the crowd, the couple immediately intercepted him, demanding he follow them to the soft-serve ice cream machine to capture an extensive 14-shot sequence of them playfully feeding each other Vanilla Swirl. Think about what happens to human logic when the marginal cost of a product drops to zero. People often replace the desire for actual quality with a bizarre compulsion for sheer volume, convinced that hoarding 200 photos is mathematically smarter than taking 2 good ones. This couple took that economic anxiety and weaponized it against a single employee. For 3 consecutive days, they tracked Julian across all 15 decks using a terrifyingly accurate mental map of his shift schedule. They demanded he photograph them playing mini-golf. They made him stand inside the glass elevator to capture their slow descent into the atrium. And they even flagged him down in the buffet at 3 in the afternoon, aggressively requesting a high-fashion portrait of them eating a plate of lukewarm nachos. Julian politely tried to explain that there were 5 other skilled photographers on board, but the couple insisted they only wanted him because he understood their angles. The breaking point arrived on day 5, when the ship was docked in St. Thomas. The couple marched directly to the guest services desk and attempted to file a formal written missing persons report. They were absolutely furious because they had decided to do a spontaneous couples workout in the gym, and Julian was nowhere to be found to document them using the elliptical machines. When the bewildered guest services manager checked the staff schedule and flatly explained that Julian was currently on his legally mandated, unpaid lunch break in the crew mess hall, the groom did not apologize for his panic. Instead, he slammed his keycard on the desk, cited his unlimited photo package, and demanded a prorated onboard credit for the 45 minutes his personal photographer had selfishly spent eating a sandwich instead of photographing his wife doing squats. 6. The thermal suite on a large cruise ship is a quiet, dimly lit sanctuary featuring heated ceramic loungers designed for passengers to relax for maybe 30 minutes after a deep tissue massage. But when a middle-aged woman named Joanne purchased the $200 unlimited spa pass for a 7-day Caribbean sailing, she treated the transaction like she had signed a binding commercial real estate lease. On the first sea day, Joanne arrived at the spa at exactly 8 in the morning, placed a thick paperback thriller and a heavily reinforced water bottle on the premium center lounger, and simply stopped moving. She did not use the eucalyptus steam room. She did not use the thalassotherapy pool. She just laid flat on the curved ceramic tiles in a white robe, guarding the thermal heat with the motionless intensity of a desert iguana basking on a sun-baked rock. By 2 in the afternoon, other passengers who had also paid for spa access began aggressively complaining at the front desk that the premium chairs were entirely monopolized. When the spa manager finally approached Joanne, kneeled down, and gently suggested that maritime etiquette usually dictates allowing other guests to take turns using the thermal chairs, Joanne slowly opened one eye, adjusted her cucumber slices, and stated that unlimited means unlimited. She remained on that exact ceramic slab for 11 consecutive hours. Only breaking her posture to accept a plate of sliced melon, she had successfully badgered a passing massage therapist into fetching for her, fully transitioning from a paying passenger into a permanent architectural feature of the ship. 7. On a premium cruise line known for its upscale cocktail program, the unlimited beverage package normally tempts passengers to simply drink a few more margaritas than usual. But for a retired couple named Brenda and Tom on a 10-day Caribbean sailing, the package was merely a convenient vehicle for high-stakes agricultural extraction. The ship's signature martini bar prided itself on using authentic, imported Italian Luxardo maraschino cherries, a gourmet, thick syrup garnish that typically retails for about $25 a small jar at specialty grocery stores. Tom, a former corporate auditor, recognized this high-value asset on the very first evening. Have you ever noticed that when certain people discover a tiny, exploitable loophole in a prepaid system, they will happily strip mine it like a natural resource regardless of the overwhelming social awkwardness? Brenda and Tom were not actually drinkers, so they approached the busy bar every afternoon and ordered 2 Virgin Shirley Temples. However, they strictly insisted that the bartender place exactly 8 premium Luxardo cherries on a wooden skewer in every single glass. The exact second the drinks were served, Brenda would pull a heavy-duty plastic Tupperware container from her floral tote bag, systematically slide the 16 sticky cherries off the skewers, push the entirely full untouched sodas back across the polished counter, and immediately order another round. They treated the exhausted bartenders not as hospitality professionals, but as unpaid factory workers in their personal fruit harvesting operation. By day 5, the sheer velocity of their extraction had triggered a ship-wide inventory crisis. The vessel had completely drained its entire 2-week supply of the expensive garnish, forcing the food and beverage manager to officially 86 the ingredient across all bars. Brenda was absolutely incensed. She marched down to the guest services desk and loudly demanded a prorated refund of their premium drink package. When the bewildered agent politely pointed out that they had been ordering up to 50 mocktails a day, Brenda slapped her hand on the counter and revealed the true depth of her logistical scheme. She angrily explained that she had deliberately packed 24 empty glass mason jars in her checked luggage with the explicit pre-calculated goal of canning the cruise line's expensive Italian cherries in her cabin using the complimentary tea kettle, purely so she could give them away as cheap Christmas presents to her neighbors back in Florida. And the ship's completely unacceptable failure to maintain proper inventory had now ruined her holiday budget. 8. The cruise industry tradition of cabin stewards folding fresh towels into cute, stylized animals and leaving them on the bed is designed as a small, charming evening surprise. But for a retired biology teacher named Richard on a 10-day Alaskan voyage, this complimentary service was interpreted as an unlimited, on-demand origami factory that lacked academic rigor. Most passengers are delighted to find a standard towel dog or a generic cotton swan when they return from the dining room. Richard, however, decided that the included daily cabin service meant he could dictate the exact evolutionary complexity of the terry cloth fauna. By day 3, He began leaving increasingly aggressive, highly specific written requests on his pillow before heading to the morning buffet. He didn't ask for a monkey. He specifically requested a three-toed sloth clinging to the bedside lamp. The exhausted cabin steward, desperate to maintain a perfect guest rating, actually spent 45 minutes watching origami tutorial videos on the ship's Wi-Fi just to figure out how to fold a bath sheet into a recognizable arboreal mammal. But Richard was completely insatiable. He started treating his cabin like a controlled biological testing facility, deliberately leaving the room for exactly 20 minutes at a time, and expecting a newly evolved complex species to be waiting upon his return. The entire operation finally broke down on day 7, when Richard returned from a glacier viewing to find a moderately well-constructed towel elephant sitting on his duvet. Instead of smiling, he immediately tracked down his steward in the starboard hallway, handed him a red-inked anatomical diagram, and sternly explained that the elephant's trunk completely lacked the proper muscular joints. He then issued a verbal ultimatum. If the steward could not successfully execute a geometrically accurate, life-sized horseshoe crab by tomorrow morning, he would be formally reporting him to hotel management for an unacceptable lack of marine invertebrate representation. 9. When luxury cruise lines advertise their top-tier penthouse suites, they heavily promote the inclusion of a 24-hour dedicated personal butler, explicitly promising in the brochure that no request is too small. This phrasing is intended to make guests feel comfortable asking for a dinner reservation or a freshly pressed shirt. But for a 30-something lifestyle influencer couple from Los Angeles, this marketing copy was interpreted as a legally binding contract to utilize a senior hospitality worker as their personal, full-time social media art director. The couple had booked a premium suite for a 7-day Mediterranean voyage, and they were assigned an impeccably dressed European butler named Thomas. Most sensible guests use their butler maybe twice a day for ice or room service. This couple decided that because Thomas's labor was categorized as all-inclusive, any given second he wasn't actively participating in their content creation was essentially money they were losing. The absurdity began on embarkation afternoon. They didn't ask Thomas to unpack their luggage. They asked him to stand on their private balcony and manually hold a silver reflective photography bounce board at a precise 45-degree angle for 2 straight hours while they took selfies, purely to capture the perfect golden hour lighting. Sociologists who study digital behavior note that for a certain demographic, the value of a high-end luxury service isn't about personal comfort at all. It's about the ability to physically manifest the aesthetic of extreme wealth and exclusivity for an online audience. Over the next 4 days, they subjected Thomas to a relentless, deeply bizarre barrage of aesthetic microtasks. They requested that he walk exactly 3 paces ahead of them through the crowded Lido deck holding a small, battery-powered desk fan to give the wife's hair a perpetual, dramatic, windswept look as she approached the buffet line. They had him arrange 24 complimentary strawberries into an exact, geometric replica of their channel's logo on the coffee table, only to photograph the plate and immediately order him to take it away because the red fruit clashed with their outfit palette. They even asked him to stand next to their deck chairs by the main pool and gently mist the husband's face with premium mineral water from a tiny spray bottle every 4 minutes, so he appeared perpetually dewy for his live streams. The operational breaking point arrived on day 5 when Thomas was explicitly instructed to put on his formal white gloves, stand on a dining chair in the middle of their suite, and dramatically pour an endless stream of sparkling water over a towering pyramid of plastic LED ice cubes while they filmed it in ultra-slow motion for a beverage commercial. At this point, the ship's hotel director officially intervened. Recognizing that the couple had completely abandoned the concept of vacationing to treat the ship like a free Hollywood backlot, the director firmly revoked their butler privileges entirely, explaining that the staff's primary duty was maritime hospitality, not digital prop manipulation. The couple was utterly outraged, but entirely devoid of embarrassment. The husband immediately marched to the guest services desk, set his smartphone on a tripod to record the interaction, and demanded $5,000 in direct financial compensation. With a terrifying level of corporate sincerity, he explained that they hadn't actually booked the cruise for a vacation. It was a fully written-off business expense. They were actively filming a serialized, multi-part video series titled Testing the Limits of an All-Inclusive Cruise. According to his incredibly detailed production spreadsheet, they still needed exactly 14 more hours of footage of Thomas performing highly specific aesthetic tasks to satisfy the algorithm and fulfill a lucrative brand sponsorship. The husband confidently argued that by cutting off their unlimited access to the butler, the cruise line had maliciously breached their all-inclusive contract and was now personally liable to reimburse them for their lost advertising revenue. There is a profound irony in paying $10,000 for a luxury suite, only to end up aggressively hoarding room-temperature chicken sausages like you're preparing for a harsh winter. Have you ever seen someone try to smuggle half the buffet off the ship in a Tupperware container? Drop the details in the comments. And if you prefer your case studies on human behavior with a heavy dose of sarcasm, subscribe to the channel